Well, Coralie, the new Canadian anti-spam legislation is supposed to help us all get what we want, less spam in our inboxes, etc., but it's likely to have some unintended effect on the travel industry that we all have to be aware of. And I know you've looked into this in great detail. Thank you so much for that. But give us an idea, where is this coming from and how could it affect larger and smaller travel businesses?
Sure. Well, thank you for speaking with me about this. I think it's just really important for the travel industry to take note because it really will impact on each and every one of us and how we contact our clients. You know, the thing is, we all want to have a little less spam in our lives, but in casting this net with the new legislation that's coming into play on July 1st, it's going to affect some legitimate business practices like sending out emails, maybe doing Facebook posts, all those kinds of things that we've been doing as part of our social media strategy.
So what is the key here? What do people have to be aware of? What is the trigger that would indicate that this could fall under the anti-spam legislation?
I think it's that as soon as you change any message that you have from being strictly informational to being a commercial message, a call to action to purchase a product or to come to my website and look at something you can purchase, it automatically changes the theme of that message. And, you know, really for a travel agency or a home-based business, why would we do things like newsletters and send out emails, send out blogs, unless we wanted to get business?
Unless you have a call to action, that's
exactly
the whole key.
So, but the thing is, what the legislation does is forces us to do our due diligence that we have permission from our clients to do this. Because just because a client has filled out a ballot to receive information when they've been at a trade show with you, it doesn't mean that they've given you permission that you can market to them ad nausea.
Right. So what's the background of this? Now, why is this happening in Canada and why is it happening now?
Well, I think everyone, consumers worldwide, have been just upset with the plethora of spam that comes into their inbox. And this is all about commercial electronic messaging. So in fact, G20 countries have all implemented this kind of anti-spam legislation. And Canada is the last of the G20 countries to do it. In doing this, though, Canada's kind of taken what everybody else has done, and they have made one of the most strictest and hardest policies to comply with. And I think it's because they want to say, hey, we're going to do it all right. But it does mean that there's a lot of things that we have to consider.
So you have to get permission from your client and you have to have a record of that permission.
Yes.
In order to contact them electronically with any type of a commercial message.
That's right.
And what are the implications if we don't comply?
Well, one of the things to understand is the difference between what we call implied consent and express consent. This is where I get concerned from an industry point of view because there's a lot of small businesses out there or home-based businesses, and we in the past have kind of relied on that personal touch with our clients that we have implied consent. We've met them, we've sold them a trip at one time, so it's implied that they want to receive information from us. And especially with small businesses or home-based where you don't have another staff member that you might push due diligence kind of requirements to, we probably haven't gone ahead and got our clients to sign off saying, yes, you can market me, you can send me tweets, you can send me stuff through my LinkedIn blogs, you can do all of these kinds of things. It's just implied that we want to receive that. What happens, so implied consent under the new legislation has an expiry date. If your client hasn't purchased something from you within 2 years, you can no longer continue to market to them. And of course, not all clients take a trip every year or even every other year, so that can have implications on what clients you have in your database. What you want to get to is what we call express consent, because that doesn't really have an expiry date until the client says, get me off that mailing list, right? So the difference here is that most agencies probably don't have either kind of consent on record, meaning documented proof that the client has said that they want to receive these emails. So that's emails, newsletters, whatever it is. You talk about any kind of commercial electronic messaging. So it's important that we get some of those things in place now in terms of starting to contact clients, because as of July 1st, when this legislation kicks in, you can't use an electronic message like an email to get the implied or the express consent. You're going to have to phone or send something out in snail mail, and like you're just never going to get an answer.
No, no.
So
we've got to get at it, and the penalties are a little hefty. The possibilities.
yes.
Yeah. How much?
Well, the penalties are really high, and that's one of the issues with this new legislation. You can be fined up to $200 per day per email message that's gone out, to a maximum of $1 million for an individual, or $10 million for a corporation. And what I like to say is it only takes one. It only takes one disgruntled employee, one upset client, or one competitor who wants to try and rat you out, and you've got a problem. Because the three agencies that are monitoring compliance for this, the CRTC, the Competition Bureau, and the Privacy Commissioner, they will work together to investigate any complaint, and it just takes one before they start an investigation.
So Coralie, with July 1st being the implementation of the CASL, the CASL legislation, doesn't give us a lot of time. What can travel agents do? What should they do right now in order to be prepared?
Well, there's a few things that they could be doing. The first thing is that they should really look at what kind of electronic messaging are they sending, what's the frequency, and then once they have sort of captured that information, then they need to see, have they been recording consent of any way? And if they haven't, then they need to start setting up a process for that and making sure it's consistent if there's more than one employee at the place of business. Even thinking about things like putting it into a policy and procedure manual, because let's say you have a travel student that comes to work for you for 4 months, you're going to need to make sure that they understand how to comply. Because once you get investigated, you want to make sure that you've got sort of all your ducks in a row for the investigation. And then doing things like, if you are sending a newsletter or some kind of thing like that, making sure you've got the opt-out, opt-in mechanism in place instead of
Not
opting
opt-out,
out.
yeah.
So people have to check that they want to receive it. Maybe updating things like your ballot forms and that, so that next time when you're going into a trade show and using a ballot, you already have that sort of standard wording in place, so you're not scrambling and then maybe doing it wrong at the last minute.
And the time is now, because you're right. I mean, after July 1st, doing it basically manually isn't the answer.
Yeah. And the problem is, you know what? We all like to procrastinate.
Yeah.
We leave it to the last minute, and people think because there is this 3-year time where you can change the consent that you hold from implied to express, I don't need to worry about it right now. But the thing is, you really do, because you can't contact them by electronic messaging as of July 1st if you don't have that type of consent in place. So really the thing is to do it now.
That's the key.
Yeah.
And let's just hope that we do get less egregious spam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could all do with a little less spam.
Indeed. Thanks so much for
Thank you,
coming in
Suzanne.
today. Really appreciate it, Coralie.
Okay.